And we're back. Thank you for sticking around, those of you who want to hear more. We're going to turn the time over to the Planning Commission now for item number 4. Chris Karn, you're up.
I just have a few because I know that other commissioners will have a lot. So I brought up the topic last week on schools in this area, and I realized that the developers talked to Alpine School District, but on the record, I think it's short-sighted to not have a school site for an elementary school on this property, and I know that's an ASD issue. There is a school site that was brought up earlier in Jordan Promenade. There's a school site there. And you know, maybe there's a school site that ASD is considering just north of this area, but there's a lot of houses here with Saratoga Shores already being full, and the new school in Legacy Farms being full with these 1,900 new doors. That's a lot of kids in our city that don't have a place to go to elementary school, and so I wish ASD you know, I had a better plan for this area because I think it's very short-sighted. I had questions on the special taxing district, which I'll hold until that comes to a public meeting, because I've got a lot of questions around that. I have questions for the developer on Village 1A, on how you maintain continuity through that village. Without possibly having an HOA to help enforce those rules. We talked about it in the break, but maybe you could address it now that we're back in session on how you maintain continuity through the homes up and down Founders and around the special project site if you don't necessarily mandate an HOA in that area, and how rules that are recorded on those lots through CC&Rs are enforced.
Sure. So as mentioned earlier, we're not requiring that there's an HOA in any of these projects. There likely will be an HOA on many, if not all, of these pods, as the villages as well as the lots along Founders Boulevard. How do you enforce it? As far as an HOA goes, they have certain teeth generally written into the CC&Rs that allow them to enforce by placing fines or setting rules or those sorts of things. CC&Rs are not only available through associations. CC&Rs are often just recorded on properties, and anyone can enforce those through their own means. They can talk to the residents if they don't comply. Then they and a group of them could also go and seek their own attorney, their own legal help to help enforce those. That's another route to doing it. Generally, along Founders Boulevard, the center median and the side medians and the trail will all be maintained uniformly. The yards, the front yards. Generally, we found if people are in a nice community, they will generally maintain their yards. If the HOA, or in this case, the special assessment area, whoever runs that, doesn't keep the median or the side medians well kept, then sometimes what happens is the homeowners don't keep their property very well also. But we've been involved in many developments where people take pride in their yards. People who are moving here, we believe, will take pride in where they live. They'll want to live on that boulevard because they are proud of it. They think it's the right place for them. And so while there's an element of risk there that they won't maintain their yards, there's also CC&Rs that will allow whomever to enforce them.
So I understand that, and I look at this and I think, okay, 25 years from now, when you're in the third or fourth owner of one of those lots along Founders Boulevard, I can tell you, living in a neighborhood in the city that has an HOA that I'm proud to live in, that I take a lot of pride in my yard, that doesn't necessarily mean my neighbor does. Similar value home, and I'm not saying if my neighbor's watching that he doesn't, because they do take good care of the yard. But there are homes in my neighborhood that don't. And without, it's very easy to say, well, a neighbor has the same covenants recorded and they can go after their neighbor. That realistically doesn't happen. When you've got an HOA in place, and I realize this is going to be up to the developers to do this. When there's an HOA in place, they can be the bad guy. That neighbor can go to the HOA or a governing body and say, they can't park their car in the grass. And the HOA at that point then becomes the enforcer and the strong arm. And so I have concern on, with having a hypothetical, we'll talk about in the future, special taxing district, keeping Founders Boulevard very nice. You can keep it very nice, but if the lots that are also very visible to Founders Boulevard, even though there's bushes and trees, if those lots are not maintained, you lose the appeal of having Founders Boulevard kept at a certain aesthetic level. And so I just had a concern on that. I have a big concern, and I understand the DAP and the densities that were approved years ago, but we also try, and what was brought up by the public, by many people, was the feathering issue in Bridger Field. And it's my understanding that the proposed villages that you have in the plan, density could shift between one to the other. Is that correct at this point?
The community plan allows for a density transfer between villages, but it's through the governing body. It has to go back through an amendment process.
Okay.
And generally, between villages, it's only allowed if there's a change in boundary. So, for example, if there were roads that were shifting, because this calls it a fluid edge, but if, for example, this roadway that you see on the north side of this project is moving a little bit, then it may require that, density is taken from one pod and put into another because of the way it's designed. So it's a little fluid to handle that density transfer. So
can you address why the decision was made to put that highest density pocket right along Redwood? What the thinking there is?
Yeah, so generally, when you're talking about planning, and I'm not a planner, I happen to be an engineer, so planners don't be offended that I'm speaking generally about planning. But generally, I've also been in development for a number of years and have been involved in lots of different planning with municipalities. What happens is along Redwood Road or a thoroughfare like this, the people who generally locate into a multifamily, a higher density project, they locate there, they're less opposed, they're less averse to the noise that comes along with traffic along a major thoroughfare like this. And so generally that's where you want to place your density. Now we understand it has to be done right. We'd like it to be done so that you've got the units facing the roadways and perhaps the driveways in the back and some open space in the front. Here there's a buffer, a trail buffer. There's also a power line buffer. There's several buffers. We're also, there's a major sewer trunk line that we're working with the city to accommodate through here. So there's several areas of buffer here that we have, but that was the most likely place where density would be acceptable and accepted. And the density, just for an example, 12 units to the acre is less dense than what is built, say, for example, at the corner of 4th South and Redwood, right there at that corner where there's density there. Is that
Legacy Farms you're talking about?
Legacy Farms.
So it's less dense than that corner?
Correct.
Okay. Gordon, do you know the road coming off of Redwood and next to the junior high? do we know, is that going to be called Parkway? Do we know that? It's on the junior high property now? So right now, coming off of Redwood, they've shifted Parkway in SSD across the street to accommodate going across the road. Can it continue to be Parkway before it hits Founders?
I don't know. I would imagine that it would be called Founders.
It'll be Founders from Redwood up, do you guys know?
That's my guess. We haven't, that doesn't get decided until plat level.
We have had preliminary discussions with the city council people on that road. Generally, you don't like to have, the city doesn't like to have a public road named the same as a private road.
Okay.
And so the private road is Parkway, it's already established. So likely from Redwood Road over, the name would be changed to Founders Boulevard, and it would continue all the way up.
Okay.
That's what I would suspect as well.
That would make sense. And from what I've been told, I work with UDOT quite a bit because of my responsibility across the street, that will be signalized before the junior high opens. Is that what you understand as well?
That's what I understand, but I'm not representing.
Neither of us are UDOT, I know, but okay. Okay. David, is the matrix, I believe, on page 14 of the packet current? The approval matrix?
No, you have it right there.
Or page 8?
I can bring it up. Yeah, that's what they're proposing there. And a lot of that.
No, this is our approval matrix. Is that the new one that we just
For the most
approved?
part, I'd have to compare side by side, but for the most part, that mirrors.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it had been updated.
Yeah, and it's been written now. The council recently changed that. For instance, the subdivisions, if you show the lotting plan and a village plan, staff can approve the subdivision because it's basically the layout of the lots and the road layout's already been approved at the village plan level.
Okay,
So that really mirrors what's approved now.
okay. I'm good for now.
Commissioner Kilgore.
Let's see, this is to David. Does an applicant get to exempt himself from the Dark Sky Initiative? And if so, how does Camp Williams, fit into that? Do they already agree with this, or?
They can request to be exempt from that, which is what they're doing for part of the project. And again, that's going to be a legislative decision that the council will have to decide, do we want to grant that in this project? They have every right to request it, and it's up to the council then to decide.
Okay. So okay. This is to the applicant. I noticed that only two, you actually addressed part of this, but I'm going to ask it again. Only 2 of the 8 villages provides at least the minimum required open space. Most of the open space is concentrated in Village 1. I was wondering, is that concentration of open space enough to make up for the hundreds of residences without adequate open space? And I know it's just this is just a community plan, and you had mentioned that each of the villages will then add or subtract or whatever, but you did say it was just a minimum, but in some cases, developers will just follow the minimum. And in some cases, actually, they give us quite a bit more open space than required, but it's not anything that we can really hold them to, especially if we've approved the community plan. So I was just worried, I was a little bit worried, is that open space going to be something that really takes care of hundreds of residences without the adequate open space? And also, can the residents of one village use the amenities managed by the HOA of another village? How does that? As far as I know, usually if you belong to an HOA, you get a key, and only those residents can use those amenities. So therefore, if a particular village has less than enough open space or amenities, then they can't actually take advantage of the open space and amenities in other villages. So I was just wondering, well, how do you plan to make sure that each of the village developers provide adequately for that, and just say, well, the community plan didn't require us to have any open space in this area, so we don't need to do it.
Great questions. With regard to the overall community plan, you can see page 21, and 21 shows how the open space provided is adequate throughout the development of all the phases. So So for example, some of the villages provide more open space than is required for that particular village, and other villages provide less than is required, would be required like 18%. But overall, by the time the villages are developed, it'll be a total of 18% minimum open space.
Okay, so you have a graph. Sorry, I can't find it. I referred to a different page, but you have a graph where it shows what the densities are per village, and you have several villages that have 0 open space. I'm sorry, not density, but open space. And it says 0%. So I'm not sure how that, now overall, yes, but again, if those village folks can't visit other villages and use their amenities, then it doesn't give them anything. You know.
So I'm responding to your first question about, you're correct, that exhibit, we could look it up here as well. It shows basically what that chart shows on page 21, where there's adequate open space for the entire project, the entire community plan, and each village has more or less, sometimes, you know, perhaps exactly the amount, but of open space on its prorated basis. But overall, it'll have the required open space. To address your next question with regard to, you know, what amenities will be available to everybody, everything you see as far as city maintained, there's an exhibit that shows city maintained areas, which are the parks, the storm drainage basins that will be park-like, like we've mentioned. Those, everyone can get to those. There'll be trails connecting through here that are all public in nature. Now, with regard, for example, we've talked about Bridger Fields. It's right there next to the Redwood Road and the entrance to the project. Because of their density, and because of their type of development, oftentimes townhome users, for example, if it's a townhome or twin homes, they like to have everything maintained for them outside, and then they also like to have exclusive benefits to pools, exercise rooms, those sorts of things. So that development under its, as it comes in through the village plan process, may desire to design and implement an open space amenity, such as a pool, a clubhouse, something like that, that would be exclusive to them. And so nobody else in the project would be able to access that. Right. That's true. But they would also be the ones paying for it exclusively. So people who aren't paying for it won't get to use it, and the people who are paying for HOA amenities will get to use them. And then those that are public, which are a lot of the open space within this development, will be used by everybody, the public.
Okay. One other thing is I worry that this development generates a lot of traffic, but not necessarily a lot of business for Saratoga Springs. Now, you do have a neighborhood commercial component, but we've touched very little on it. So I was just wondering, at this level, what kind of neighborhood commercial businesses do you anticipate, or are you that you dream of? So that we generate some dollars for this, because otherwise we're just generating tons of traffic and really no tax money spent in the city.
Good question. You know, I think there's a misconception that residents are draws only on municipalities, and that's a misconception, because it takes those rooftops, it takes those residents to fuel the commercial areas, which then pay a higher rate of tax. They go and buy groceries, they participate in different eateries and all those sorts of services. And it's market driven. We don't control the market, we try to accommodate it. So from a larger perspective, we own a lot of land in the city. Some of it's down here closer to where the Smiths is going in. And we have, we have a lot of commercial retail planned for that area, and there is some there already. We have jobs centers coming. We've sold land to entities that have job centers. So because they like to be next to each other, there was a reason why the job centers wanted to be next to the eateries. It's because of the lunch crowd. The job centers don't want to be out where the people that work there have to travel forever to grab lunch and go back. So there's a coexistence there. So that's why we're trying to accommodate the market and concentrate the retail up at what's called the crossing here with the Boyer development. With regard to this community and its commercial, the residents here will go and fuel that additional commercial that we're putting in or we're working on with the city as well as with Boyer, who we're selling to, and other users up there. But down here, we're contemplating more of a neighborhood usage. Perhaps there's room for hairstylists that are closer to the neighborhood, perhaps a dentist, perhaps something like that, where it's more servicing the area of the city. I'm sure there are better examples of that, but that's the sort of thing we might see down here, as opposed to, you know, a Walmart or a big box store.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioner Steele.
Have you considered where school bus stops will be on Founders Boulevard? I look at the median and I look at what's over to the side. Where will kids be able to wait for the bus?
We have not considered bus stops along Founders Boulevard. That's a good question, and we will ask the Alpine School District what needs to happen there to better accommodate school buses, or if this is even a route for school buses to stop.
Well, I imagine you're going to need some school buses in there somewhere.
Yeah, but I'm not sure they'll be stopping on Founders Boulevard. Generally, collector class roadways don't have school bus stops on them. Generally, they're local class roadways that have the school bus stops. So I'm not sure there will be a school bus stop on this collector roadway.
Okay, where would a child who lives on Founders Boulevard be able to go to catch a bus?
Probably on one of the roadways that's not a collector, that's a local road, so a block away, either one direction or another, I would assume. But that's something we could work out with the school district.
Okay. I wanted to say this last week and I forgot it. I noticed your mailboxes. It looks like you can drive up and get out and go get your mail. You need to think about the disabled in that respect, because if you're coming in your car and you're in a wheelchair, you need to be able to get to that mailbox, and you also need to be able to access it by a sidewalk. So if they're, just coming from their house and rolling down the sidewalk, they can still get their mail. And I couldn't tell for sure. It looked like some of them might comply and some of them might not.
That's an excellent question. We haven't designed all the mailboxes in all the communities yet. The ones on Founders, we have an idea of where they're going to go, and every one of them will be adjacent to that trail and the roadway, so they'll have accessibility. We'll make sure of that.
Okay. Is the 12.5 units per acre density in the Bridger field, is that the that the maximum, or could there be like a couple of apartment buildings that might be 20 to 30 to the acre, or is 12.5 going to be the max?
That's also a good question. So generally, we don't see this as a multifamily for rent product like an apartment complex would be. It's not got the appeal for a developer that would develop a multifamily project there. So we don't anticipate that to be the case. What we instead anticipate, that there may be a mix. There may be some townhomes, which may be, for example, townhomes can be 16 units to the acre, depending on how they're developed. And there may be some twin homes mixed in, and those are developed at 10 units to the acre, and so there's an average of 12 units to the acre depending on the mix. So 12 is not the maximum, it's just the maximum average density for Bridger Field.
Okay, well, I will say something to those that had asked the question about traffic and the multifamily. Actually, now there'll be more units there, but those units will not, by trip generation standards, they will, where a single-family home, you count 10 trips per day, and multiple family units that are less than 20 per acre are 8 trips to the acre. Now, I realize that you've got more little things there to generate that, but they do not generate as much traffic as a general rule, and that's what the trip generation you go by. I often get criticized because I ask questions that are premature. However, I think you've asked for something that I think is premature.
That's premature.
The lighting exception for the special use, really, I said it last week, I'll say it again. That's without knowing for sure what's going in there. We all assume, but there's a saying about assume. And to me, that exception to our code should come at the village plan. And I really would like it taken out of the community plan.
We will think about it. The problem that we may run into is that generally, because the village plan is a subset of the community plan, that we try to allow the bounds and the guidelines to be established in a community plan that then the village plan complies with. And so we need to keep that as an open item and an allowable use, and then during the village plan process, it can be identified and designed better in a way that's conducive to the communities.
If any other entity came into this room before us and said, we've got something that we're going to put in, but we're not going to show it to you. We're not going to tell you what it is. And by the way, we want an exception to your code. I think all of us would probably go, no. So to me, that is premature until you come in, and I know you're going to be coming in with a village plan, and that way we can talk about it at that time. The other, some of the things that I feel right now, you know, greed is a sin. And I feel like we're getting a developer that is greedy because we need more open space. And we talked about this at the break. You keep saying, the way that I understand that all of this works is the community plan has to go by the DAP. And you pointed that out many times. But you keep telling us that the community plan, yeah, we've got the minimum open space. But you'll get more when the villages come in. Well, the villages are based on, and we have to make our decision on what the community plan says. Now, if some developer comes in and says, oh yeah, I want to give more open space, then we're not going to turn it down. But they don't have to. They only have to meet what the community plan says. And I'm concerned about that. Some of your villages have no open space whatsoever. That's not a good quality of life for those people. And I don't know that we're going to be able to require any extra space, open space. Maybe, but I don't think so. It works like the community plan and DAP are like our development code. And if it's not in there, we can't ask for it. The development code If it's not there, we can't require it. And it's the same way with your DAP and your community plan.
May I address that just for a moment? I get that. I get that you have concerns over the open space. I also know that there are asks of us to reduce what we could ask for by right of the district area plan. For an example, in the district area plan, meeting houses can be counted as full open space. And we were asked when we first submitted this plan to count or to reduce that and take meeting houses out of our open space plan, which we did. So while you can ask us and we can ask you, together we're going to agree on something that's mutually beneficial to us. And I was mentioning also at the break, if you look at what we're doing within the community overall, and I realize tonight we're talking about the community of Beacon Point, but we own vast lands, and just recently you saw the promenade come through on the Jordan Promenade. That has far more open space. We participated as the applicant, certainly the developers coming through there as well, but we're the landowner. Oakwood Homes did that, and they provide far more open space than is required in that area, and it's appropriate because of the sensitive area around the Jordan River. We've also participated with the city on the open space at the city park. We donated in exchange for open space credits the 30-acre park that's going in right now is Patriot Park. And so, Sandra, I know it's hard to trust, but generally what we're doing, if you look at our pattern of development, we're providing far more open space overall. To the north of this project, there's an area that's a sensitive land as well. It's Tickville Wash, and there'll likely be additional open space associated with that. And what we're trying to do is provide connectivity with our open space so that the neighborhoods, even that aren't a part of this community, and in Grandview and Saratoga Hills, will have some corridors that they can walk all the way up there and enjoy that open space and back on nice trails and amenities. So we anticipate that overall, when you look at our entire district area plan, we'll have far greater open space than the minimum. And we're not being greedy about it, but we've got to meet the market demands, and we've got to be able to accommodate the development in the city.
Kevin?
So help me understand why it's your position they're not meeting the open space. So I'm looking through the different villages. I just need to understand so I can analyze this a little bit better. But it looks to me that each village plan, they have an excess of open space.
Some of it's zero.
So if you go to page 21, at each village plan stage, it says the difference provided versus required, and they're in a surplus for each village plan until the very end. So help me understand. I'm confused by that.
Look at number 6, Parley Orchard. Open space provided, 0.
Sure, but they're ahead though. They're getting ahead by installing open space. If you follow the last column on the right, they're ahead at each village plan stage.
Okay, what's there, yes, meets what the DAP says. For quality of life, no, it does not, because the person that lives in Parley Orchard, the mother that has a child that wants to go to a playground, and I'm not sure where Parley Orchard is, but down here, where are they going to go? They're going to have to get in the car and go to the community park. And what we've tried to do is think about quality of life for residents, and I don't think that the way they have put this out, I don't think that it meets it. And
okay,
someone
well then,
mentioned the special use project site, and yes, it says that you can use that as open space, but it's not going to be open space. And I use the example, and I can't do it because everybody will laugh, but say somebody wants to go and sunbathe, have a picnic up there. I doubt that that will be allowed. I suspect they would be asked to cover up or leave. And so that's not true open space. Neither is Founders Boulevard. That's asphalt.
I understand. So
Yes, they're meeting it, but they're not giving quality of life.
well, then that's the job of the Planning Commission, is to determine whether or not they meet the open space requirement. And I don't see anything in here that says they don't.
Yeah.
They meet the
Unfortunate.
definition. The only thing I would ask for some more clarification is for those two areas, the special project open space, as well as the detention basin open space, that they need to specify what type of open space that is per the district area plan. They haven't done that. So other than that,
We can't do
I
it.
understand what you're saying, and you're basically disagreeing with the prior legislative decision that was made in approving the district area plan. And the job, of course, of the Planning Commission is to determine if it meets the requirements. It's an administrative decision.
Okay. Now, I'm glad you said that. Then the other thing I have an issue with, of course, I talked about this, and it's in, I disagree with our planning director's findings. I didn't feel like he had gone far enough when it says no structure excluding signs and entry features may be closer than 20 feet to the peripheral line of the planned community district boundaries. The area within this 20-foot area is to be used as a buffer strip and may be counted towards open space requirements, but shall not include required backyards or building setback areas. Now, when I read this...
Now, can you continue to read there, because there's more information.
Right. The city council can choose not to require it. We don't have that privilege. So, to me, the finding needs to go ahead and say what's in there. Even though you don't want to do it, we don't have the ability to say you don't have to do it. And when that comes up, I would think that if they say, no, you don't have to give the buffer strip, then you have a little bit of an issue, because your homeowners there then could not have any kind of structure in their backyard closer than 20 feet. And that's, most people want a little outdoor shed. That you're going to have restrictions on those folks. So that's something to think about. That would also give us a little more green space. I have a question about, on page 69, and if my iPad doesn't freeze up, I can point to it. And I will say, I don't want everybody to think, and I don't want the applicant to think, that I'm against this. I think that this has the opportunity to be a really, really nice neighborhood. It just needs a little tweaking. And my iPad has... Okay, thank you. The side yard requirements. It says setbacks shall be measured to the foundation, notwithstanding bay windows, pop-outs, and other structures, including eaves, shall not encroach upon the 5-foot setback or public utility easement.
I think that says excluding eaves. If it says including, it's a mistake.
Okay, now, excuse me. So, are you telling me that then if you have a bay window is, can or cannot encroach into that 5 feet?
It cannot. And the reason being is because the 5 feet needs to be clear space for public utility easements.
Not only that, for a fireman too, to carry a pack.
Yeah, well, there are certain, from a building permit standpoint, if you were to encroach in that area, that's the minimum space between structures, you'd have to do some firewall, some additional structural construction, and we're not proposing that.
Okay, that could, I'd like to see that kind of rewritten a little clearer, because the way it's written, if you take out between the commas, it doesn't make any sense. And so you need to kind of rework that and where it's clearer.
Okay.
I'm just checking to make sure I've covered everything. As I say, I think overall the project will be a good one. I just disagree with a few of the elements. And as I say, I would really like to, you know, any other person coming in asking for something and, oh yeah, well, we're not going to tell you what it is. But we want this, and we're counting it as open area. And oh, by the way, we want an exemption from the lighting standards. I can't go with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next is Commissioner Anderson. I'm sorry. Commissioner Cunningham, sorry, you're on.
He recognized you, but I'm on.
Due to technical difficulties.
So I'll go first then. My first question had, I'm going to agree with Commissioner Still on the lighting. I guess if we somehow can remove that from the motion, I'd be in favor of that. The other thing that I had was the applicant had requested some flexibility with neighborhood commercial. Do we need to add something to our motion for that, or is the motion going to cover it?
Is there opposition to that?
No, I would like to see it added.
It's already in the community plan. They have identified
Okay.
that neighborhood type as being a possibility, or place type as being a possibility.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure it was included. I have some concerns about the high density. I'm kind of concerned of the distance that it has from places like Smith's or even like where the IHC is. One of the things with high density is a lot of the millennials now who purchase for their first home only have one car, and that goes to work. So if somebody's left at home, they have to rely on public transit, and right now there's not a lot of public transit in Saratoga Springs. So that's a concern I have of having that there before the public transit's in place. That's all I have.
Commissioner Anderson.
Well, I want to tell you that we're grateful and glad to be part of this and for the good work that's gone in here. I'm grateful for the public input. Hope you'll come back for the village plan as the community plan's a much higher level, and we'll get in more detail with the village plan. I live in the Grandview area as well, and I feel the pain, especially going north to south and south to north. It's difficult, and I don't see any remediation coming anytime soon. In fact, as I look through the traffic report study, I see a lot of failed intersections during peak hours along Redwood Road, and I don't see those being alleviated until Mountain View Corridor comes, and it seems like that's post-2025, and so I don't know that for sure, and I'm looking to you, Gordon, for confirmation there, but so that's but you do have, developers have the right to develop, and you've checked all the boxes. As I see it, I do consider the special use site or special project site as open space, and I think it'll be very good. I do have a question though about the traffic study. It says that you use the Payson special use site to do your analysis of this special use site. And I wonder if that's really apples to apples, only because the Payson takes in a much larger geographic area. So the patrons coming to that special use site, I would imagine frequent it more on the weekends, while this is in maybe a higher density area. And so midweek, especially with the junior high right at the entrance, complicates that or compounds that maybe more than we anticipate. I do have a question for the applicant, though, and my question is, where have you seen slip lanes? Like, is there a place locally where we could see that? Maybe I need to ask you if I can ask the applicant, but I'm curious to know where we have a successful use nearby of the slip lanes. Is there somewhere nearby that's being done successfully?
We're not aware of any local here in the city of Utah. There may be, but we took these concepts from several locations in California where they seem to work really well for them. And then we modified it to meet some of the objectives we had, like walkability, that we thought would be better. For example, at the intersections, you'll see the trails come into the intersections, so they don't have to cross over 2 lanes. They don't have to cross over the slip lane and the lanes and another slip lane to get from one side of the street to the other. The slip lanes come back into the main flow of traffic at the intersections. So we feel like we've improved on some of those areas just based on our residential network instead of perhaps some of the different applications where we saw it used.
Yeah.
This is a fairly new concept, as in just the last 10 years or so. As Thane mentioned, the studies that we've been looking at are specifically in California, but they're used worldwide. China uses them a lot. I was involved in a project 2 years ago for Salt Lake City where they were looking at doing this very thing on 5th and 6th South to help with the traffic on those corridors. So it's something that the state has been looking at for some time now, but it hasn't been implemented locally yet.
Okay. I would also just add my comments to maybe Commissioner Carnes and maybe, Kevin here informed us that, as a planning commission, they have 16,000 and we get to help maybe influence where the high density is located. And if my 2 bits for what they're worth, I would place them right there, close to the school, close to Redwood, close to that public transportation, which isn't there yet, but maybe will come someday. I think that would be the ideal location for that kind of housing. And so those are my comments.
Okay. Who's next?
What is the plan for snow removal, particularly on Founders Boulevard and with those slip lanes? Where's snow going to go?
So there are medians and park strips, either on either side of the slip lanes that can handle the snow. So on one side there'll be medians. For example, the main thoroughfare will have a median in the middle and then a side median, and then the slip roads, that snow will go into the side median.
And so on the main thoroughfare, in your median you had trees and hedges.
Mm-hmm.
And so is the snow plow going to throw that ice at those hedges at 30 miles an hour, whatever?
Yeah, it'll pile the snow in those areas. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and is there any, if you're pushing the snow to the middle, what about oncoming traffic coming the opposite way?
One of the other things that we're going to be looking at as we get into this with more detail, something that we've done several times in the past is so you have the slip lane, which also has parallel parking, that come wintertime, the last parallel parking stall, or 2 perhaps, after a certain month, gets dedicated as a snow collection area, basically, so it gets piled up onto that one location.
And is that those 2 spots strictly for the slip lanes?
It could be. Like I said, we haven't gotten into that detail quite yet. It's most likely going to be what Thane was presenting, but there are other alternatives that we could look at.
I'm not a snow removal expert, but if the slip lanes are a block long, it seems like there needs to be adequate space, whatever that is, to hold whatever snow you use to calculate that.
So typically a block long, Utah block, 600 feet, one parking stall will typically accommodate it.
Okay. And are you planning, well, I suppose it's the city, but part of why I asked this is I understand this is potentially more excruciating than it needs to be with open space, but it's something I think all of us are concerned about. And I know in the district area plan, the Founders Boulevard is counted as open space, and potentially the only justification in my mind for that is that it has a bike lane. And so will that bike lane always be free of snow?
That'll be up to the city snow removal to make that determination. I mean, they're going to be the ones removing the snow along Founders Boulevard and the bike lanes. But there's more than that. There are, this cross section, it's 147 feet wide, and it provides much more livability. There's two 10-foot sidewalks on either side, pathways, if you will, for those who want to ride bicycles there if they'd like to, or in the wintertime. I mean, there's more room here to do a lot more than just a typical roadway cross section.
Of that 147 feet, how much of that is asphalt?
I don't know for sure. Probably about half or so.
Okay, so half of that open space is what cars drive
We could
on.
actually look at it and calculate it if you'd like to.
I don't know that it's necessarily important to get, that specific. I think the point is it's an unfamiliar thing for us to be counting asphalt that cars drive on as open space. So it's a little bit different. Like I said, it could be a little excruciating. I also have some concerns about the open space. I understand that overall as a project, you're above the open space, but you're also getting 20% right off the bat because of Founders Boulevard and the special project area that normally people wouldn't get. But my main concern with that, and I think Commissioner Steele touched on this, is I didn't see any open space south of Founders Boulevard. And you've continued to say that developers, they're looking at this open space at the village plan level, and as they develop these different projects that they're going to be putting in open space. But just to reiterate, once this plan is approved, or once we recommend approval to the council, and if council approves it, we have no ability to go and force a developer to put in any open space. If they meet the open space for this community plan, then we as a planning commission can't really say much. And so I share the concern that while you may have the best of intentions of having developers put in open space in each of these villages, we really don't have a mechanism to force them to do that and to provide that, the living enjoyment that I think the city has looked for in the past. And I don't know that we can necessarily do anything because from what Kevin says, overall you meet that. Beyond that, though, I would hope that, and potentially this should have been said last week at the work session, but I hope that in each of these villages that there is or even as the community, there's a variety of amenities put into place, that it's not just all playgrounds, that potentially there could be, you have your trails, but things for recreation and, even, I know it was an example and it wasn't necessarily tied to doing something here, but a water feature or something, just a variety of open space amenities for the residents to enjoy. That would be a good thing to see, I think. Do you know if there are going to be any public transit or mass transit bus stops or anything? Do you know if, I don't even know where along the plan that comes into play, but if you have high density like Commissioner Cunningham talked about, and usually or generally if it's more high density there's less traffic, it'd be nice if there was some sort of mass transit or public transit bus stop. Do you know from staff or the applicant if that's been discussed?
So we're not aware of any plans for public transit at this location specifically. There are long-range, in the near future, there are long-range plans, and of course, that's really something that the Utah Transit Authority, whatever they're called today, I think they're still the UTA, and the city can work out as far as transit goes. And that's something that's beyond us as an applicant, our ability to require UTA to do that.
Yeah, we can generally, encourage you, hey, we need a transit stop here, but it's going to be ultimately up to UTA, and they generally will base that on density. Typically, you'll get the stops where there's a higher density or, large commercial type development, which will hopefully attract riders to and from that site.
So we're not aware of any stop, and it's based on ridership. UTA would love to have a lot of stops, and they try to get ridership by starting with vans and van pools and working up from there. And so, as ridership increases, UTA will respond.
Okay, I was just curious. I don't think we need to spend any more time on that.
Chair Wilkins.
Yes.
Can I address the Planning Commission? So I want to make sure the Planning Commission is clear about what my position is with regard to their open space. I'm not taking the position that their special project area or the detention area meets the open space requirements. They have not identified what type of open space they have there. I don't know what they're going to try to, or what category they're going to try to have there, but let's say it's Pocket Park, for instance. And what this says is, according to the district area plan, it says small and frequent, generally with passive recreation that ensures walkable green space access for everyone. May contain specialized facilities that serve a concentrated or limited population or group, such as tots, pets, or senior citizens. So right there, I don't know, I mean, we need some more details about that special project area, because according to this, let's say that they want to use Pocket Park as the open space designation, that has to be walkable for everyone. It definitely presumes that it's going to be accessible to everyone. And their special project area, I'm not sure that they want that. So they have to come to us and be able to prove that. Now the detention area, that makes a lot more sense. They said that they want to have that be a park. They talked about having it be shallow so it can be used. That is definitely something that I think just, knee-jerk reaction, it would meet the requirement. So we just need some more details about that. I'm not saying yes or no, but yeah,
Okay.
you bring up a good concern.
We do have that noted that, well, at least I have it noted, that that's something we're going to have to look at as far as a condition if we're going to put forward a motion.
I believe those are all my questions. I just wanted to reiterate that we are thankful that you guys are here, and I personally, and I think you've heard it from several of the council, that this is an exciting project, and we're excited about the kind of product that could come in here. As you can see, I think there's a limited amount of concerns, but they are some concerns that we've had. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments before I sum up? Okay. First of all, I'd like to I do appreciate your video that you had. It gives us a good idea of how your project is going to come together. It's very nice to see that. Your materials were very extensive and detailed, and we're grateful to see that. It helps us to digest it and understand it better, but also leaves it open for us to criticize. So, two things that I see that we've discussed that are items that we may want to address as far as a motion. One was brought up was the specific types of open space. So Thane, and we just want to make sure that you have addressed the specific types of open space and what they are. And so we may add that as a condition. The second thing is two of our planning commissioners have brought up the lighting. I just wanted to ask Kevin Thurman, do we have, as a planning commission, do we have the ability to request them to remove something from their proposal as far as lighting restrictions for the clear sky ordinance or the dark sky ordinance?
Well, you're the recommending body to the city council. So the city council has a decision to make, and the community plan needs to go to you first. Even though the language says the city council can approve an exception, you still have the ability to make a recommendation. But you don't approve it, you don't deny it, you make a recommendation for approval or a denial of that dark sky exception. Or you can make a recommendation that we delay approval of that with more details in the village plan. Or, you know, as far as the buffer is concerned, Commissioner Steele mentioned, you make a recommendation to approve that or deny it. I think you hear what they're saying about it. I think you can make arguments either way that we should grant an exception to that. I'm not sure that, it may or may not make sense to have a 20-foot buffer, open space buffer around the project. That's going to probably diminish other open space, but at the same time, maybe they put in a trail. So you can make arguments both ways. And that is something that the Planning Commission can make a recommendation on.
Thank you. So before we go and entertain a motion, I just wanted to get your feedback on the open space as far as determining what types of open space they are. What's your opinion on that, and when do you think that you'll be able to provide more detail?
So I just pointed out to Kevin about, we did designate it as a place type, special use, as an open space type, but we failed to identify some of the detail about it. And so we'll include that detail in a paragraph like we have on the other open space types. We'll do the same thing for this storm drain basin. So we will take your feedback and go back and revise the plan.
Thank you. And would you accept that as a condition if we were to place that?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions before we? Sure. Commissioner Steele, just a moment. Go ahead. Wait. My fingers are dry. They don't activate the button. Go ahead.
What page in the DAP does it call out about storm basins? I've quickly thumbed through and I can't find it. I found waterway, channel.
What context?
The storm.
Has a lot of open space?
Mm-hmm.
I looked, I didn't find anything, but they can. So this is serving two purposes. It's a storm drain, it's a detention basin for stormwater, and it's also going to be used as open space. So they just need to classify as one of those open space types. Pocket park, regional park, I think neighborhood park is one of them. And as long as they do that, they would meet the open space requirement under the district area plan.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions?
I have a question, Mr. Chair. There was some discussion, some public comment about feathering between the densities, and I know that's kind of our standard operating procedure. I believe it's even
it's part of our code, yes.
But is it in the district area plan?
I don't think so.
I don't know that I saw that in the district area plan.
And then I think part of the concern was the fact that that density is not, the structure of that density has not been set. It can kind of float and it can morph. And so I know that was a concern for us and for some of the public, and I don't quite know how we can address that. Whether it's simply a condition that density has to have feathering. Does the district area plan?
It's feathered to a point, not a massive feathering job, but those edge conditions, they're required to have larger average lot sizes adjacent to existing residential. I had those numbers pointed out on one of my slides, where in the Wilson Knoll, I want to say it was 8,500 square foot average, and then the Parley Orchard, that was 7. Now the lots adjacent to Parley Orchard are around 9,000 square feet, and the lots adjacent to Wilson Knoll are about 10.2, 10.4 as far as size goes. So yeah, there's probably a better matchup with the Wilson Knoll. There's probably about a 2,000 square foot difference, where the Parley Orchard is probably around a 3,000 square foot difference. So to a point, they are feathering somewhat, or they are increasing the size on that edge condition, which they pointed out.
Would that feathering be appropriate from a planning perspective if it was if the typical code was applied to it?
There's no set standards on that. Obviously, you're going to have a house, then you have a street, then you could go the smaller lots. In a sense, that feathers, yes.
That's the reason for the buffer.
Okay, 4 items. So before we entertain a motion, oh, did you want to say something?
One more comment. I'm trying to answer Commissioner Steele's comment about where I referred to the storm basin as being park, improved as a park. Page 7, if you look at the highlight on page 7, under detention basins or storm basins there, of the community plan.
Oh, not the DAP.
No, not the DAP.
I've tried to find it in the DAP.
Okay. I'm sorry. I thought you were asking the question about the reference I made earlier to the community plan having a storm drain. But we'll identify it further nonetheless.
Okay, I would like.
Too, when they're talking about the types, or there's a reference to, there's just a general paragraph in the community plan about open space. And they say the open space has to provide a recreational amenity. So that is to their credit. They have addressed that, even on the special project area. So they'd have to comply with the community plan that generally refers to open space as being usable. And now that, we should probably, we should get into more specifics, because they'd have, like we have said many times in this meeting, they need to identify an open space type. So then you can take that definition, let's say they call it a neighborhood park, you can read the definition in the district area plan about what the neighborhood park is, and then you can determine if it meets that requirement. We're lacking that detail on some of the open space areas.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'd like for the developer to look at page 42 of the DAP and understand maybe what the overall thinking was, because it says that the following list applies particularly to urban and neighborhood public spaces, outdoor rooms, create intimate places, and it goes on. And just as you're thinking about your open space and the types, you might want to look at that and see if you can maybe follow that a little more.
Okay, so 4 items. If someone wants to propose a motion, was the open space types, storm drain as use for open space, lighting, and feathering. Those are the 4 that I have. And buffering, specifically, the 20-foot buffer.
Well, my thinking is that we should not eliminate it, or that the council should not, and it would be, it's up to them. There is that point in there, but we honestly can't say that they can get an exemption from it.
All right. Well, let's entertain a motion and see where we go.
I'll do it in a minute here.
Okay. We'll help remind you if you want help. Wait. There you go.
I move to recommend approval of the Beacon Point Community Plan with the findings and conditions as listed in the staff packet, as well as with the additional conditions of the applicant better defining the open space types as required in a community plan. Better define the storm drain and detention and retention ponds as open space or not. A better look at feathering of the high density areas and how they interlace with the lower density. The 20-foot buffer And what was I supposed to say with that?
Something about,
I'll recommend that we retain the 20-foot buffer and also remove the dark sky ordinance exemption from the community plan and expound on it within the village plan so that we understand why the request is being made. Make sense?
we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any question on the motion?
Would Commissioner Kilgore, would you be willing to amend your motion to stipulate that the approval or the recommendation of approval for the dark sky ordinance doesn't take effect until after we know what the special project is?
Agreed.
Rather than remove it?
Agreed.
We have an amendment on the motion. Do we have a second?
Yes.
Approval with that? Okay. Any other questions? Kevin?
So for just a clarification, the detention basin, they do identify that as open space. The information that is missing is the type of open space, that we need better clarification for that, because they do mention that it's open space and it provides a recreational benefit, but it needs to specify what type of open space as allowed in the district area plan.
Sorry, that's exactly what I meant. So,
okay, thank you.
I'm sorry I didn't say it that way, but
do we need that condition then, if we already identified that we need to identify or the applicant needs to identify the types?
You addressed that as your first
Yeah,
question.
so how about if I say that the applicant better identify the types of open space and including the detention ponds in that as well?
Amended.
I agree, yes.
Agreed. Question?
Yes. I'm concerned about your amendment on the lighting, rather than, it really should come in with the village plan. And that will be the special use, would be that village plan.
Personally, I don't think the community plan disallows making those kinds of requests, so I don't really have an issue when it comes in, as long as it's identified why.
Right. Well, it'll probably be at the village plan then. Okay, I'll drop that.
Unless it's not.
Well, the condition is that they do identify what it's for.
Okay, this is where we're recommending. Body, and all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for your time. And if you want to stick around, we're going to approve our minutes from last week, and this could get exciting. I'm just kidding. You're free to go.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the minutes from October 8th, 2008.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Reports of action.
Chairman, I'd like to add that I abstain.
Oh.
It is noted that Commissioner Kilgore abstained because he was not available at that meeting. Reports of action. Commission comments.
I'll just say persistence has paid off. I went by Mod Pizza tonight, and the lights are finally on the building, and it looks like the parking lot lights are on.
Question is, did you go in?
Well, I've gone in many times.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? Director's report.
Have a great Thanksgiving.
Have a great Thanksgiving to everybody else as well. If without objection, we adjourn. Thank you.
Is that as short as you thought it would be?